Okay, welcome to my YouTube channel, which is about Web3, Metaverse, and crypto. Here, this is Telegram, and here I opened the Chilibangs Community, and I was there, and I recorded, and yeah, have fun with the video. That's all.
My name is Taylor Ryan. I'm a six-time startup founder with 15 years of digital marketing experience. I'm CEO of Web3 Ventures, Clint's, Air Nordic, No Secrets, and a bunch of other things that are in the background. I'm originally from Washington, D.C., so American, but I live in Copenhagen, Denmark, and I came out to, near Nordic actually it was near Con, where I first experienced Lisbon, and I'm like, cool, I might be able to do this ecosystem. So I'm here for a week to check everything out. Maybe I'll move here, maybe I won't, but it would be great to meet everybody either way. Some of the companies that I've scaled up is either the chief marketing officer, the first hire, or the head of marketing, basically the person building and leading the marketing department. One IPO, two acquisitions, one merger, Clarity, Gimbal, and Actimo. Currently, I am working on Layer 3 Ventures. It is a ethical and sustainable fund that is geared towards Layer 3 dApps. So it has to have utility, and hopefully there's a purpose for it being there. It's been a wild ride. We're trying to fundraise, as I'm sure most people are aware right now. Money is tight, but say la vie. That's what it is. Clint was my growth hacking and digital marketing agency. I've worked in big, small, medium, large, built a handful of innovation labs. And these are just some of the clients that I've worked with just over the last 3 years. Many different Web3 projects within those. I work with a lot of accelerators. I was running behind today because I was working with Algorand out of Techstars in Boston. So I'm one of the mentors, and also run a bunch of different workshops with that. So I've done over 140 different keynotes and workshops just in the last 3 years. If you can't tell, and as I get ramped up, I'm really into this shit, so hopefully that comes off. I've done a ton of different projects within the near ecosystem and shortly outside of it. One of my favorite projects was WeGrow, which was a cannabis token, and the founders decided that they were really into mushrooms too. So they were like, cool, let's just do complementary alternative medicine. We're still going strong and pumped as of 2 days ago, 337%, which is pretty nice. I am a council member on NEAR. How many people are familiar with NEAR protocol? Oh, okay. Awesome. Okay, very cool. So yeah, I approve anywhere from 100K to $250,000 every single month. So if you have a project that needs money, then please get in touch with me. I'm the only Taylor Ryan in all of Denmark, so I'm not hard to find on LinkedIn. It's probably the best channel. Cool. My goal for today is quite simple. I'm here to provide value. I want to show you guys a lot of the different tactical and practical things that have worked for me scaling up all kinds of different Web3 projects, whether it's token launches, NFT projects, or just scaling in general. And a lot of the foundational stuff here is really stuff that I've harnessed over the last 15 years of experience. I have a pretty good understanding of the audience, but I'm always curious, like how many people are actually building a startup and they're builders? Cool. How many people are marketers? Right. And how many people work for larger organizations but are just curious about this space? All right, cool. Interesting. I like it. So I'm going to throw around a lot of jargon. It's just what happens within Web3, but the marketing jargon that I use is often growth hacking. Growth hacking is doing the most with the least amount of time and energy in order to get the biggest results. So think of it as, I never want to do a manual one-for-one approach. I always want to get 50 or 1,000 or even 1,000,000 results out of doing just one thing. So think of it as optimization meets efficiency via testing, and ultimately you have tools replacing a lot of the manual actions. I think this is where AI starts to get really sexy, but there's tons of software as a service tools that exist. One of the metaphors I often use in terms of explaining what growth hacking is, let's say a car breaks down, there's two mechanics on duty. The first mechanic has read every book over the last 5 years about cars. The second mechanic is dirt underneath their fingernails and has fixed all kinds of components against all kinds of different makes and models of vehicles. I want the second mechanic to fix my car, because they actually have practical knowledge, they've solved problems that are probably similar to whatever's happening with my car, and I consider that person a growth hacker. I will move as fast as I possibly can, so if you connect with me on LinkedIn, you get the slides. I am recording, I think Bruno is also recording, so hopefully if this is interesting to you, then hey, you can get access to it, and you don't have to take a ton of pictures. I will be covering a fuck ton of stuff, so bear with me, I move fast. Again, connect with me to get the slides. So the first thing I like to do is get into some of the theoretical. This is one of the hardest things that often plagues a lot of founders is everybody tries to start everything from absolute zero, from scratch. Whether it's website copy, the core visual identity, pre-launch, launch, post-launch, all of these things, people try to reinvent the wheel. And there's this great video, if you look it up, Milton Friedman explains the beauty of nobody alive can create a pencil because you don't have all of the knowledge necessary in order to craft a saw out of iron, in order to chop down a tree and be able to craft the individual lines of a pencil, to mine the graphite. All of these things take a ton of expertise. You don't need to reinvent. You don't need to figure out all these things. People have done them for you. And I think one of the hardest things that I often encounter, especially with founders, is they try to recreate everything from absolute zero. I call it robotic mode. So you're constantly like, oh, I guess the next step is do this. And ultimately it burns people out and you don't get to where you want to go. I'm not going to throw a ton of metaphors in that, but one of my favorite theories is isostatic adjustment. There is no such thing as a square, cube-shaped planet or a triangular, pyramid-shaped planet. The reason planets are spherical, circle, is because it is the least amount of mass necessary in order for an object to exist in zero gravity. We need to think about the things that we're building in terms of what is the least amount of work that I need to do in order to get whatever it is that I'm trying to get done, whether it's traction in the form of buyers, stakers, whatever, community members, you name it. Try to find it in the wild. I often say, if it doesn't exist in the wild, there's probably a reason. And a lot of people, especially where I come from, the Nordics, they get really antsy or weird about copying people. I always think that there's a difference between using others as inspiration and outright copying. There is a big difference. But just be aware that most people suck at most things. Like 95% of the population is pretty rough at what they do. And ultimately, you need to take the best parts of all your competitors and pile it all together. And I'll show you what that looks like. Cool. So one of the first hacks that I often do when I step into an organization, either as they're a client of mine or I'm a founder or whatever the case is, I try to figure out who else is in this space. Who are my direct competitors? There's a fucking website for this. It's called CoinMarketCap. Most people, I'm sure, are familiar with that. It's really easy to find stuff. If you don't like that, that's cool. Go to CryptoState. These things have a breakdown by category and projects within that category, so you can start to get a feel for what companies are in there. If you don't like those websites, there's literally hundreds more. One of the big reasons that companies or startups don't get funded is because they claim that they have no competitors. And it's like, no, it's bullshit. There's always a competitor to what you're building. And I promise you just have to look for it. And it's a really easy thing to do in terms of Google searching. But if you don't like Google searching, great. There's other tools that you can go about finding people that you're directly competing against, people who are trying to take the market share away from you. So when I build these things out, I often look at core competitors, feature competitors, and industry competitors. I use Google Sheets. Other people like Notion, Airtable is also a use case. Whatever you decide is the best way to do it, it really helps to stay organized. So this is kind of one of the baseline documents that I work from. This is a company that was doing NFTs, a token, and a marketplace for basically GSA certified diamonds. So like when you get a diamond from a diamond dealer and you need to show that it is authenticated, you have to go through all the steps. And the founder was like, oh no, there's no competitors. It's like, check it out, dipshit. I found these in a matter of 25 minutes. You have to look around. And that's one of the things that you really need to show investors as well. So as I mentioned before, I move fast. Feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn if you want the slides. But let's move on. So building inspiration is one of the most important things, and that also comes from some of the competitors. So I try to collect as much of the competitor assets as I need. It really depends on the nature of your project. So if you're building a light paper and a white paper, I put out probably 15 of those. If you're trying to create from absolute zero, you're wasting your time. Because how many of those 15, 20, maybe even 30 competitors have done a lot of the different work for you? I'm talking about the tokenomics. I'm talking about looking through the procedures that they put together for the how to buy. An executive summary that looks professional instead of, how do I go about writing this? The FAQ, with all of the frequently asked questions that other projects have already sussed out for you, you can find that directly through your competitors. But I look heavily into the websites, but I'll go into that stuff later. White papers are one of the most stagnant and slow areas of growth, and it takes people forever to write these. These are the basic areas of every single white paper. If you're missing one of those, you got a problem. They're not the hardest thing in the world, but I mean, you're looking at a really basic template, but it's very scalable if you know what you're doing and you know what you're looking for. One of the hardest things, especially if you're launching a token or you're launching some type of NFT project that has real utility, is you need to list out what are the benefits. What's in it for me as somebody that might buy it or hold it? Which means you're looking at all the applications, all the different rewards and advantages. List all that stuff out. You can do this in a Google Doc. You can also do it in a Google Sheet. The release schedule is super important, and this is also stuff that you can take to your pre-seed and seed investors. In terms of building out the token governance, I'm not going to go through all this stuff, but there's so many little areas that you can just check the box. Ultimately, sometimes just looking at your competitors is the best way to go. When people are trying to decide whether or not they want to buy into your project or invest into what you're doing, it often comes down to a sniff test. And I mean, look no further than FTX and Sam Bankman-Fried. Was this project built by nerds? Like, kick the tire, like, yeah, so you want a car? Here's a car. Is it built by nerds? Yes. Ultimately, sometimes that's all you need in order to get a project through the door and at least get people interested in buying. So some of the basic things that people look for listed here, you guys can read, but let's move on. So I get into lots of debates about brand. And brand is super important, don't get me wrong. Like, there's a lot of different conversations we can have. But one of the areas that I think I get most stuck on is people paint themselves into a corner because they're like, oh, brand's everything. It's like, yeah, but it's going to evolve. And if you paint yourself into a corner, ultimately it's really difficult to start saying the things that are blossoming out of what happens when a project gets further along. So please don't paint yourself into the corner. I can remember being in stupid meetings about brand that didn't matter. It was at a company of 200 people, and we sat with all the senior managers, 12 of us in a room, and they were debating on what type of coffee mug we should get for the office, because we're communications, software as a service company, what represents us? And one of the guys is like, well, we should get like a mug that has like more of an open mouth, because like we talk, like we communicate. It's like, oh, like I don't have time for this. And so I would just say, don't get too focused on brand, it will evolve. There's a big difference between the way that Snoop Dogg talks and David Attenborough talks. The way that you should communicate your brand is really simple, like an old friend talking to you at brunch. Really simple. Getting down to some of the aesthetics. How many people have seen channels either on TikTok, YouTube, or Instagram where it's the oddly satisfying stuff, where it's like carpet cleaning or power washing channels? Has anybody seen that on TikTok, YouTube? Yeah. So like it's this whole concept of this oddly satisfying thing that just ties people in. And we should think about the way that we represent ourselves, whether it's on social media or on our website, about this visual congruency. You can see these are different displays in a grocery store that really look quite nice. And it's because there's a recognition to spacing, to colors, and it works. So a really simple way to look at this is, where would you rather shop? The fucking store on the top that probably looks like a great place to buy weed in the back, or a grocery store that is decently organized? I want to buy from the second one. I feel more comfortable putting my money into the second one. You need to think about your website in the same way. In terms of finding a logo, it's super straightforward. And if you've been reading anything or seeing anything more recently on Dolly or on any of the new image generators, there's tons of different logo generations that you can do, but these are just some of the free websites. You can click into the website, you don't even have to sign up, or you can sign up using a fake email, and you can get tons of free different logos there. If you need to get a style sheet, which most people do, there's templates galore, and there's tons of different tools that create it for you. And if you're looking for social media posts and all the different templates that you can use for those, holy shit, there's tons of places to go to get those. I use Envato Elements. It's about $14 a month, and it gives me tons of different tools and tons of different templates that I can use across any of the projects that I'm working on, either as an agency or as an individual. Let's dive in a little bit to some of the website stuff, because I do think it's relevant. Most projects should have a website. It'd be weird if you did. There are tons of templates. If you connect with me on LinkedIn, you get mine for free. This is my SaaS template. Depending on what you're building, it might not be a perfect fit. But if you're building something that hasn't quite launched yet, there's so many little check boxes that you have to look at. And quite frankly, if you are about to launch and you don't have a countdown timer on your website, creating this FOMO of you're missing out, you're missing a major opportunity. The big things that are needed in a basic landing page that you can get either on Wix, on Squarespace, or if you have a little bit of know-how in WordPress, and there's plenty of other websites like Webflow, you need a value proposition, hero image, call to action, a little bit of social proof, which is basically testimonials, logos, places where people can find you, whatever the case is. Some of the benefits, countdown that I talked about, and then a risk reversal, like cancel any time, bail out now, no commitment, whatever the case is. So I take a lot of inspiration from different websites that I found, and the core pages are listed there in the yellow. So you have your home, product and service, and the about. And usually there's some complexities to the website architecture, but one of the things that I often bring to the accelerators I work with is how to use your competitors basically directly against them. So using that big list of competitors that I talked about, I use a Miro board, M-I-R-O. And I take all of the screenshots of each section of my competitors. So this is the hero section, the next section below that is the statistics section, the next section below that is the features section. So I screenshot all of my competitors. This allows me to know absolutely for sure that I'm not missing any of the sections that my other competitors have done better than me. And I do each row for each page of my website. So the top one is the home page, the next one is the about page, after that could be the features, and so on. So you're able to map out everything that all of your competitors have done and make a better, more interesting, more branded, more well-articulated version of it. It's basically like getting the best player on the opposing team to play for you, but you're taking the best player from all the teams. It's a really interesting way to do things, and this allows you to not do that. How do I build from absolute zero? Because again, your competitors have done this for you. It's really easy. Layouts is like this weird thing. Like I've always said that Web3 like has a real UX problem, user experience problem. I often see this image, text, text, image, image, text, text, image, image, text, the entire way down the page. We're trying to break up the visual static. So the idea is look at lots of different ways to do that. Those websites listed there provide hundreds of different templates that show you all kinds of different layouts. I think it's super easy. The About page is a chance for you to brag. People check out the About page, it's the second most traveled page of any website out there, whether it's SaaS, whether it's crypto. People understand that they have people behind this project. They want to know who's building it. So it's a chance for you to inspire people. The big stuff in here is basically your mission, the vision, some of your values, the founding team. Show fucking faces. Show me that you're not going to be a rug pull. These are really easy things, but you'd be surprised how many people fuck up. Cool. User journey. I know that everybody that is within maybe a more advanced blockchain project, something that's a little more deep tech, they tend to immediately get people to connect their wallet. But we have to realize that there are going to be people that are native to crypto and familiar with it, and people that are obviously not. And so what is the user intent of the people that are visiting our website, and build avenues for them to go down? So there are going to be people that just want to get into the ecosystem, the forum, see what's happening. Or maybe it's the Discord group or Telegram. There are some people that are just researching, deciding whether or not they want to buy. There's stakers, there's investors, there's potential partners. If the only avenue to get in touch with people or get in touch with your project is to join the testnet, you're probably not going to convert every time. So that means take lots of chances with lots of different ways to convert people. These are all the different tools that I've used in terms of different types of conversions. So you can convert people over video. You could do lead ads, but it's more difficult when it comes to Web3. Hello Bar is a free tool. Hello Bar, it's one of Neil Patel's tools. It's an exit intent pop-up. Convertful is probably one of my favorites. Most of the CMS or content management system website building tools have a native tool that allows you to convert people. There's notification tools, and there's also webinars that allow you to convert people on the spot. I was surprised how many people on some of my Web3 clients convert via exit intent pop-ups, so I definitely recommend Hello Bar or Convertful. And that means every single page of your website should have an avenue for people to get in touch with you. Give their information so you can sell them on whatever it is that you're building. And these are examples of some of the exit intent pop-ups. My favorite one down here is probably this one. So not ready to sign up today? Enter your email and we'll send you a surprise. And it's like, all right, well, yeah, fucking I like surprises. I put my email in and of course it's spam. But ultimately I found it interesting and it was kind of a shift in expectations. Cool. I'm going to dive into some social media stuff because I think it's super important, and then I'll hit some watering hole stuff. So establishing your presence on social media early is a huge deal, especially because there's so many scammers. I don't know how many people have joined different groups and you constantly get DMs from clear like scammers, and it's like, oh shit. If you don't reserve these social media profiles, you're going to be in trouble. So Noam is a great tool that basically allows you to plug in the name of your project, and it finds out whether or not the name's been taken, which is super helpful. And that part is free. They have an extended thing that you buy for $100 that basically registers for you. So social media URLs across all of these different channels are super important. And before you start, I think it's incredibly useful to start looking at your competitors to figure out what good looks like. What is it that I want to aspire to and represent from whatever it is that I'm selling versus what's off the top of my head? And in many cases, I think a lot of people just skip that because they're like, I want to say what I want to say. Again, use your competitors to your advantage. So I try to build out a content plan with the baseline of pillars, and I'll go into what that looks like. I repurpose a lot of my competitors' content, so the stuff that gets the most engagement, the most likes, the most clicks, whatever the case is, I try to repurpose that for my company. Pin posts, like if you look at a lot of your competitors, they'll have a number of pin posts that are super relatable and also utility-based, like interesting things that you need to have as a community member. Don't try to write those from scratch. There's a lot of different automation things I'll go into, but yeah. So, content pillars. There's lots of different areas you can write about. These are some of the basic ones. Your company. So people want to understand how the project is coming along, who you are, how you've been represented in the media, different new partnerships and that kind of stuff. All that goes in that bucket. The industry. So stuff that's happening in the news or interesting things that are happening with the ecosystem that you're a part of. Launch. So giving news as to when you're going to launch or new features that are coming out. And then engagement-based stuff that's really interesting. What that looks like is something like this. So I have my about, engagement events, and so on. What I do is I often use Canva. I'll use a lot of virtual assistants or interns, especially if the project has no money or is poorly funded. I'll have a landscape version and a square version. In many cases, I'll have two of each of those. So that means that any time that we want to come up with a new piece of content, we already have the template. We're just changing one element of it. Either the image or some of the text. And this allows us to scale up 3, 4, 10, 20, 50 posts a day, which is quite interesting. Memes are a big part of, excuse me. Memes are a big part of marketing within Web3. And I often find that it's a lot easier locating the most popular memes outside of your ecosystem as opposed to trying to create the most fire memes from absolute scratch. So if you go into a lot of different groups, and I'll show you how to do that, you can find memes that are very easy to translate into your project so that you're constantly putting out the funniest or the most creative and most interesting stuff. And ultimately, you're just changing it to make it into your own. I do this with a lot of Web 2 projects, but it's worked really well in Web 3. So I basically have done this kind of switcheroo deal. So I collect all of the most popular posts for all of my competitors or projects that are related to my project. I'll make sure to take all of the text, I rewrite it using an AI writer, then I run it through a scheduling tool, and then I have a checkbox that basically says, yes, is it scheduled, is it scheduled, is it scheduled, yes, yes, yes. What you end up getting is, again, 10s, 20, 30, 50 posts a day, which makes it appear that your particular project has a crazy amount of activity and people are going nuts for it. These are just some of the different social media tools that allow you to schedule. My favorite is Publer, but it's really up to you. All of these work across Telegram and Discord and the great little tools. Most of them have a freemium model as well. Bots for Discord, I'm not going to go super deep into this because I find it relatively boring, but yeah, setting up bots is super easy. It allows you to have the welcome message verification and some of the basic stuff. But save time where you can because honestly, social media management is a pain in the ass and not the most exciting thing. Creating the right channels is super easy. Again, looking at some of your competitors or your favorite projects, you can figure out what channels make the most sense. Don't reinvent the wheel and don't overthink it. Telegram, tons of different bots. I think my favorite is probably ActiveChat for creating a lot of different automation based on their activities. And also BotFollow, which I don't see in there. But that's right. Clean post structure is not something I'm going to go super deep into, but using emojis to basically do line breaks allows people to skim. Everybody loves skimmability, and that's why most posts that get a lot of engagement, whether it's on Reddit or within Telegram channels, have these line breaks that are separated with emojis. I'm not going to go into super deep detail because I can tell it's not the sexiest thing. try to keep the content coming as fast as possible. And again, this comes from repurposing, and that's a whole different ballgame. Cool. Any questions on this? I can't tell if this is like the most boring shit that anybody's ever seen. Or yeah, we're good. Okay. Like, did I miss like the weed that was getting passed around, or like whatever? All right, cool. I'll go into influencer marketing because I think it's a little more exciting, and then I think I'll finish with the watering holes. I think that's interesting stuff. So influencer marketing is a motherfucker when it comes to Web3 because it's the only industry that I've seen that people can ask for ungodly amounts of money, literally 3 to 5 times as much as they would in any other sector. So I had originally set these different prices based off of the hundreds of influencers that I've talked to, and it continues to go up even in a bear market. So honestly, there is no set minimum for what you would end up getting out of an influencer. It's whatever they accept or whatever they need in order to get the job done. What I found, and I've linked in this presentation, is a really interesting presentation that came out a couple of years ago by a company that was doing more of like a Headspace type of project. And they found that micro influencers, meaning people that have less than 10,000 followers, tend to get the most amount of engagement because the people that follow them trust them, and in many cases even know them directly, as opposed to the big, massive macro influencers like a Kim Kardashian or something like that. So the reality is, if you are doing influencer marketing, it actually is better to go much smaller. And influencer pyramids are a thing. It's super interesting to get people to do duets and mention other influencers in your videos. Also, you're paying everybody through the chain. So the mid-tier guys mention the macro guys mention the nano guys and girls. And it's a really interesting way to make it look like there's an authentic viral thing happening, but no, they're all on fucking payroll, and this is a very expensive thing. The 2 times that I've done this have been roughly $70,000 to $80,000 to get everybody paid off and all the stuff checked through. So it's not cheap, but it does a really great job. Quickly, I'll go through outbound. So there's not a really great tool to do a ton of outbound at scale, meaning reaching out to individual influencers and getting them on board, because there's a whole process. So first you have to target these people, you have to find where they are, you have to discover the right types of people that are in this. So by the number of followers, you do outreach, which is creating unique messaging that is tailored using a couple of different AI tools, and you get a contract in place, and then you create unique links so that you can track who actually got people to your website, or in some cases, who got people to install. So targeting, I go by niche, and there's different types of influencers. We're not going to go into super deep detail on the theme of them. Discovery is quite easy in terms of finding what you want from the size of the influencers. Then the outreach, there's a few different tools that you can use for that. Sometimes DMs is the best way, which is really painstakingly slow, and that requires creating multiple accounts and virtual assistants to do that. Then creating an influencer contract. I've used Fresh Proposals. I've also used Block Survey. And then providing a guidance contract, which is basically like, here are the things that you need to include. If you're an influencer, I don't need high production values. Sometimes more authentic looks better. Cool. All right. I will quickly go into watering holes because I think it's one of the more interesting areas of how you can scale any project regardless of Web 2 or Web 3, and it's actually really valuable for me. Again, like this whole theme of not creating from zero is what directly comes from this. So I always try to figure out, where do people go in terms of my target customers? Where are the people that are going to buy from me? Where do they go to vent? Where do they go to ask questions? Where do they go to get answers? Like get inspiration? All these things, like where do they hang out when they're not busy thinking about me or considering buying from me? Like there's a spark moment sometimes, like when do you get new tires? Well, I guess one of them goes flat. Or when do you buy a new plan for a phone? I have no idea. But if we don't know those things, I need to figure out where people go so I can get into these channels. So there's 2 different types of channels. One are distribution channels. So these are things that you don't necessarily have the ability to get into a conversation. It's people that own these individual channels, usually personal or professional. You can engage with the people that are writing, but ultimately you can't get stuff listed on their channel. Then you have community channels. This is where Web3 really takes off. I think the traditional Web 2 sense was like LinkedIn and Facebook groups, but Reddit, Discord, and Telegram are the main channels to really hit on. And when you start looking through these different platforms, you realize there are hundreds of thousands of groups you can get into. So if we're talking about shilling or engaging with any social media group, it always breaks down to this. And regardless of the channel, I found this is about right. So 90% of people that are in any social media group are fucking lurkers. They don't do shit, they don't like, they don't post, they look at shit, but they'll never engage. And it's the most frustrating thing because we put so much time into doing everything. I was at an event the other day, and I was finished speaking, and somebody said, "Hey, I saw you doing this and that." I'm like, "How'd you know that?" They're like, "Oh, I saw it on LinkedIn." I'm like, "Well, did you like it?" And they're like, "No, I fucking like your stuff." And it's like, oh, weird. A lot of people do that. For whatever reason, they feel like it's something about them. Engagers are 9%. So there are people that will like and engage in a lot of things. That's a really small fraction. And only 1% of people actually create content. So if you are a content creator, you have an absolute opportunity to get into some of these places and make a name for yourself, or to attract people in these existing communities. Make interesting content and drag people over to your communities. Grab whoever is at the existing watering hole and make them come to your watering hole. One of the things that I often find when I'm evaluating different projects from here, again, I award anywhere from $100K to $250,000 every month, is I look for paid traffic or stolen traffic. And in this presentation, if we hit play, I don't have internet access right now, but it shows a bot farm out of China, and there's literally thousands of phones lined up for rows and rows, where people are using bots on Twitter to basically fake the engagement. And the reality is that doesn't do you much service if you're buying these fake followers, fake engagement. Don't do it, it's a waste of time. One of the most important things that I've often tried to teach early marketers is that if you're in this kind of zone where it's like, my boss told me to change the sign, so I did. It's like, if that's all you're doing is just kind of like peddling shit, then ultimately it's going to be engaged in the same way. So either make something exceptional or not at all. So collecting watering holes looks like this. I take the fields that are here, group name, URL, description, number of members, tabs by category, and then I segment them on the different tabs below. And this gives me firepower to be able to get virtual assistants to basically spam the fuck out of any group that could be relatively interested in what I do and what I build. I didn't invent the rainy day, I just had one of the best umbrellas. In terms of repurposing watering holes, I like to reuse everything that I do. So I'm not just creating this once and leaving it. That same list of all the different groups that I could potentially engage with turns out to be a great blog post. Here's 50 great groups that are related to the cannabis industry or NFTs or whatever it is that you're building. It's great social media content creation. So scraping the best posts from every single group. It'd be the common questions that continuously come out in those groups that spur the most amount of comments and the most amount of arguments. Anytime you see 50 to 100 comments on something, it means somebody did something right. Somebody asked the right question that got somebody all riled up. You can have that same engagement on your social media. And you guys can read all the other stuff, but ultimately it's a great way to really pull out some powerful stuff. Industry publishers. Super underrated area, but the reality is there's lots of people publishing all kinds of stuff, so why not talk about me? Why not talk about my project? So I build out giant lists of different publishers that are related to my industry, so I can reach out to them and say, I got something really cool that your either readers or people that follow you need to understand. And it just requires a little bit of outreach, and also everybody is viable. How many people have ever read the book, it's by Ryan Holiday, Trust Me Online? Anybody read that? One guy. All right, we'll get him out. Great fucking book. The reality is with PR, everybody is viable, meaning everybody has a price. So if you want to get published on any of your competitors, it's really easy once you know all of the different publishers that are out there. It's great for blogs, thought leadership, that kind of stuff. In terms of being able to get price sheets, connect with me on LinkedIn. I got a ton of these, and ultimately it's pretty straightforward. Like it's not expensive, and it's a great way to also be able to put links out about who you've been published by and all that other stuff. People still read newsletters, contrary to popular belief. I don't, but somebody does. Lots of people open them. One of the greatest ways that companies get a lot of traction on product on. How many people have ever gotten on product on? No? Okay. How many people like the sun, like a sunny day? No? All right, we got a few people. Just checking. Cool. So yeah, sunny days. So I would definitely say getting into a newsletter is one of the fastest ways to take an existing community and get them over to your project. There's a few different websites that are listed here. Substack's probably my favorite. That allow me to basically discover newsletters, buy niche, and reach out to them and say, hey, how much for a sponsorship? It's a great way to get early traction in your project. All right, I got a few more slides, I promise. So videos, like whenever we don't know how to do stuff these days, we look it up via YouTube. YouTube is the second most popular search engine on the planet, and according to Gen Z, they use TikTok 20% more than Google. So it means that people are using these channels to find stuff. You can be the stuff that they find. You just need to dictate the type of video that they're going to engage with. So I have built lots of different competitor lists and influencer lists that allow me to take the most engaged videos of all of my competitors and all the influencers in my space and figure out what are the types of pieces of content that are engaging enough people to have either the top search result on YouTube or the most amount of views and engagement on TikTok. And the stuff that we're creating Web3 stuff is the how-to guides, tutorials, product reviews, and then straight up promotion. And if you're really trying to go next level shit with it, this is one of the most interesting areas that I've done a lot of work in, which is targeting direct videos on YouTube. Now there's some gray area when it comes to Web3 marketing on YouTube, but the reality is you can target anybody who watches a very specific video and show your ad for 30 seconds prior to them engaging with that video. Which means if you're looking for one of my competitors, you better fucking believe I want to be showed first, so I have a chance to grab them before they end up at one of my competitors. Cool. Online in-person events, I'll go through this real fast. I always make lists of events. They're available online for free. I mean, we're at one right now, so I think most people are familiar with it. There's online events and offline events. When you're trying to get PR, it's so easy to get in front of people. They come in all of these different flavors in terms of in-person workshops and meetups and conferences and all that. I collect these things using these data fields. So application status, event name, topic, event URL, speaker application URL, all these other things. And then what that looks like is ultimately this. So again, I've done over 140 different presentations in the last 3 years. That's during like COVID, like it's crazy. So what I do is I have all of my basic information, I have all my testimonials, I have all the work that I've done, and I have virtual assistants for $3 an hour or interns for free running sequenced outreach to any event organizer that's on my list of events, and also virtual assistants doing all of the event applications on my behalf. Which means at any given point, I might be able to do 2 events a week, 3 events a week. It's a big deal within Web3 to get in front of an audience. So it's definitely something that any one of us can do, and it's just a matter of building out the right order of operations. So what can you do with an event list? You can repurpose it. You can find interesting people to come to speak at your events if you decide to create one. You can release blog posts about expert roundups, get expert opinions based off of who the best speakers were at the other events. You can social media curate. You can take stuff off the social media promoting the events. There's lots of different things. You guys get the idea. Buzzwords and jargon real fast. Everybody within Web3 uses the same vernacular, which is really hard to understand. And you'll find that when you are building something that is somewhat unique, it's a really great SEO play because lots of people don't know what this stuff means. So getting into the world of search engine optimization, it's one of my favorite areas in building great content around the jargon words that are related to what you're building is a huge win. And what I do is basically define these. I'll use either a content spinner or an AI writer to basically rewrite some of the best definitions, add a little bit of my own personal flavor, and then I leapfrog over my competitors. There's lots of different use cases for jargon. Again, I like to repurpose everything, so it's web copy, it's keyword and SEO research, social media, you get the idea. Statistics is another fun little area. I do that with statistics as well, so statistics that are related to either my industry, different things that we've done, and this allows me to basically, again, be able to repurpose a ton of content based off of really relevant statistics. I also do this with quotes. This is like super easy to repurpose on social media, and these are just some of the repurposed use cases that I've done within Web3 and outside of it. It just creates lots of different stuff. Last thing that is super dry and boring, but I'm going to go through it. Questions. Lots of people have questions within different groups. Rather than having your moderators answer the same fucking question in the same email 1,000 times, you just need to be able to create a giant list of questions that thanks to GPT-3, you can answer all these questions. So I use Answer the Public. Neil Patel recently bought that, so you have to sign up, which is super annoying. Questions DB and FactFox are both great tools. And you can have GPT-3 answer all those questions. I also find that questions are some of the highest search volume and some of the most interesting search stuff. So in terms of SEO, you can outrank your competitors. And what I do for all my moderators with all these different questions that commonly hit the group is I make sure to check them over. I have my little map guide up here. So like red means I can't figure it out, don't know the answer. Yellow is uncertain. Green is like, yes, it works, and Taylor has approved it. Ask the question to Taylor is the brown, and then teal is basically plan to create a social media post around it. So rather than answering the same fucking question 1,000 times, you only need to do it once, which is super easy. Use cases for questions is basically the same thing. You have all these different ways that you can instantly create questions. All right, the last thing I'll do is run through just a quick understanding of what you need to understand before you get into launching a new project, because I find that that's one of the most undervalued things. So the average timeline to launch a token, an NFT project, an infrastructure project, you fucking name it. It's gonna take a minimum of 3 months. Anybody that's telling you different is either lying to you or they're full of shit. Like, it's not possible. Because you need to do all of these other things in order to get yourself there. And I want to cover just some of my favorites, some of the ways that you can speed it up a little bit. But the big parts are looking at the launch as a 3-part series. So the first part is the pre-launch, aka the angel round. That's where you get family, fools, and friends. You also get your earliest investors involved, and you basically are building every bit of foundational work prior to launch. You have your pre-launch, which is your seed round. This is what some of the general public might get access to. It's made for your immediate community and getting them invigorated. And ultimately, if people miss that first round, then fall into here. And usually, like, everything needs to be done 3 days prior to launch. And then you have your actual launch, which is usually pushing everything on exchanges and making sure that you're messaging anywhere and everywhere. So these are just some of the things that you need in the pre-launch. You have your list of trusted people. I can't tell you how many people try to do crowdfunding without having already created a list of people that are ready to invest. I'll say that again. If you are doing crowdfunding, you need to know for certain that everybody that you're going to reach out to has already said, yes, I will fucking give you money. Most crowdfunding campaigns come into crowdfunding with a lot of money, almost half of it already funded. And if you don't think that's the case, you're kidding yourself. It's how it works. So please never try to crowdfund without actually establishing with LOIs, letters of intent, with real people that are ready to invest. Otherwise, you just won't get there. Cool. I send invites via the templates to get people into my pre-launch. Token pre-launches generally work this way. And then after they commit, I send them the how to buy guide so that there's no questions. And in many cases, you'll have to do a white glove approach if you're doing something that involves a wallet. Airdrops. How many people have participated in an airdrop? Okay, cool. So, a few hands there. So, the tools that I would say I used to use, my main one was Gleam. How many people have ever used Gleam? Cool. Gleam was pretty good for a really long time. Street Widget is kind of the competitor. There's tons of different tracking and analytics tools that are listed here, but ultimately, like the airdrop, the way that it used to work is not the same way that it should be working. I'll show a couple of examples that I really like. But when you're doing an airdrop, either way, you have your claim instructions, you have your requirements, and then you have kind of your promotion. And some of my favorite shit that I really became obsessed with is layer3.xyz. Has anybody ever used layer3.xyz? Awesome. You gotta jam out. Cool. Yeah, it's one of my favorite. I would say check it out. It's super interesting. It creates a unique experience because with airdrops, the problem is, and I've done tons of these for different projects, you have these assholes that just sign up for the airdrop, they get their free shit, and they never return, which seems like kind of a waste of time. So with these different tools like Layer3 and Gimbal.xyz, it creates a task that you have to do, and it validates on whether or not you've done it based off of whether or not you've connected your wallet. So in many cases, you got to do something in order to get something. So connect your wallet, follow me on this channel, and stake $10 or $100. So you're getting people through the user experience, and the comfortable part which is so hard often to get started. And you can see that this has worked in a lot of interesting ways. So like my favorite one is Arbitrum. So if you go to guild.xyz/Arbitrum, you'll see that like they're supposed to be like the next Aptos, but like giving away like $50,000 per person. So it's still open. They haven't announced when it's going to be, but they have a really interesting dashboard that allows you to see all of the different things that you've had to do. So you have to own different tokens from this particular DeFi project, or from this particular NFT project. You have to own these 3 tools. It's pretty badass. And the reality is it creates real like fanatical people that are following not only your progress, but have done the work to get there, which I find fascinating. Cool. I can't say enough on that. I could probably do a whole presentation on that. If you're doing an IDO or an ICO, it's probably not the right time until the market turns around. We're in like a dead cat bounce anyways. But there are tons of listing sites. If you are trying to do the old school route of the airdrop, get on as many of these listing sites as possible. It'll pump up your numbers, but just being aware that most people are not going into airdrops with the best of intentions in mind. And those are all the different things you can fill out for that. Cool, last little bit for the pre-launch, and then I'm out of here, I promise. So the seed round is I'm trying to go after the immediate community to get as much money out of them as possible prior to going live on many of the exchanges. I set a countdown on the website, and I'm constantly pumping the channels to make sure everybody knows how many hours, how many days, whatever's left. I usually set a goal, a cap, and tell everybody when they missed it, how much they missed it, and we'll have to get into the public round. For the token listing stuff, I could do a whole different presentation on that. It's super stressful. It's the main tools that you want to get listed on. CoinMarketCap and CoinGecko. These are Google Sheets. If you need help filling those out, it takes a while, but I'm happy to work with you if that's what your thing is. Then your public round or your launch is basically no holds bar, and you're doing lots and lots of press releases, lots of posts that are hitting all at the same time across different community channels. Lots of influencer marketing should be happening all at the same time. There we go. Oh, it went out for a second. And last little bit on launch notes. Landing on a high note, but yeah. So the first 2 rounds need to be confirmed before you do your launch round to make sure that people are getting into the different price points. Let the community decide in terms of whether it's a scheduled launch versus a time launch. The reason for that is some people will buy directly before and then sell immediately after. When it's randomized, they have to be online. That's how you get these giant fucking dumps. So just something to think about. I do purchase restrictions in terms of the percentage of supply within the first 30 minutes, the second 30 minutes, and then after the first hour. And just a few other things you don't have to worry about. Whew. Okay, so I covered a lot of areas. I think of the mic's dying as well. I don't know how interesting this was. I dig this stuff. I think it's one of those things, especially as you get further into whether it's Web3 marketing or just building in different projects. I think the more interested you become. And I really do think that checking out either guild.xyz or Web3 is a great entry point if you haven't really gotten that into the space. But some of the things that I've talked about, I'm not still running Clint's, but if you are interested in a little bit of sparring and a little bit of advisory, I'm always down. I do an online course like everybody else. Growsecrets.org is my online masterclass. And yeah, that is about it for me.